Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Beautiful host Avantika. Today we have two beautiful guests with us. They have been together for a very long time. Jake runs a mental health based theater company with the aim of destigmatizing controversial mental health topics through the medium of art. He has a background in acting social personality disorder while also educating others. So Jake has been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and Emily was diagnosed with OCD with traits of BPD. Today, in this episode, we explore the relationship, the dynamics of actions, and we'll be exploring more about how it manifests, and get to know their journey a little bit better. You guys know I advocate for therapy all the time. Beautiful You encourages you to seek the right professional help and care for you. This is where AMAHA comes in. AMAHA is a mental health care organization offering scientifically driven and evidence-based high-quality care through therapy, psychiatry, their community support, and self-care app. Whether you're dealing with anxiety, depression, or any other severe condition, AMAHA has about 140 plus psychologists and psychiatrists working to support you. You can access therapy and psychiatry services online as well as in person through their centers in Bangalore, Delhi, and Mumbai. Beautiful You listeners get a special discount. Use the code BY50 to get 50% off your first session with AMAHA. Just download their app. It's called AMAHA, AMAHA, or visit their website to book your first session with AMAHA. And if you know someone who is struggling with mental health, share the love and the discount. Let's make mental health care accessible for everyone together. Invest in your mental health. You deserve it. So, yeah, welcome to the podcast, Emily and Jake. So happy to have you on board. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having us.
So to begin with, could you tell us how you guys came together as a couple and how long have you been together?
Yep. So we've been together around 4 years now.
Yeah.
Roughly 4 years. We met at university. So we both studied I did acting at university. Emily did media, marketing, that kind of thing. And we collaborated on a project, which was actually the birth of Antisocial Theatre. It was a sort of university project where we had to create our own theatre company, or we had to go and do work experience. But I wanted to create my own work, so we started Antisocial Theatre from university, and then we brought Emily on board to help with the media marketing side of things. And that's essentially it. We just grew from there, professionally and romantically as well.
That's wonderful. So for the listeners who haven't listened to your first episode, could you tell us a little bit about what antisocial theatre is?
Yeah, so Antisocial Theatre, it's essentially it's currently an online platform where we aim to educate and destigmatize controversial mental health topics through the medium of art, typically theatrical via theatrical means. So I would, from an acting background, would write monologues, short stories, that kind of thing, from the perspective of when I'm having like an episode, if you like, or when the symptoms are quite prevalent. And I'll put it into a sort of theatrical form or a poem, something like that. And then I will voice that over, and Emily will turn it into like a sort of a movie, if you like, a short film, which we've done a few times now on the page. And it's just a way of getting across how I feel without just talking like this. It's more of I feel like human beings tend to like relate to things more when it's in a creative sort of through creative means, like music, art, things like that. So that's the whole concept behind Antisocial Theatre.
That's wonderful. Has it been offline yet? Did you do some work offline?
Yeah, I mean, so we launched in 2019, and we did intend to have our first play that we put together on stage. So we did actually. We were in the process of making a play, and that would have been our first production as antisocial theatre, but obviously COVID came along and
Ah,
derailed
okay.
everything.
Yeah.
So in order to keep going, we adapted as much as we could and became online. So the plan is to eventually maybe put on a play that I wrote, put on that play in the future, hopefully, fingers crossed. But we do kind of accept that the market is kind of online. Like you have to be online as well. So we're kind of doing a bit of both, essentially.
Oh, that's wonderful. I hope you're able to have your first play soon enough. That sounds like a really wonderful initiative, honestly. So yeah, I hope it reaches to the right audience and educates them on antisocial personality disorder. So speaking of ASPD, we have done an episode with Jake on previously on the podcast. So if you want to know more about his journey, please check it out. The episode. Um, it's Could you tell the audience who are new to this? Could you tell them what ASPD is, and could you, Emily, also talk about how what exactly is and what BPD is?
Okay. Would you want to go first?
Yeah,
I've been
so
talking.
I'll talk about my OCD. Was that the question? Sorry.
OCD.
Yeah. So OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder, and it is characterized by someone who experiences obsessions, which could be intrusive thoughts or specific themes that are quite distressing to them. And then they develop things called compulsions, which are used to offer reassurance, and maybe I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Just sort of offer reassurance for those obsessions. So compulsions are things like checking, reassurance seeking, rumination. A compulsion could be anything, just that offers relief from those obsessions. A lot of people might have seen OCD in the media as sort of the cleanliness disorder or the perfectionist disorder, but it is actually far from just that. And it's actually a lot darker. So the themes that people suffer with when it comes to OCD are often quite dark as well. It could be something called harm OCD, which is worrying that you're going to cause harm to yourself or to others. Relationship OCD, which could be that you're worried that you've hurt your partner or cheated on your partner or that your partner's cheated on you. Religious OCD, it could be that you've committed some sort of blasphemy against your religion. Just anything that is specifically important to you, it will affect. And obviously those compulsions then come in to try and help with the obsessions that you're experiencing, but ultimately kind of gets you into a really horrible cycle of just obsessions and compulsions. And yeah, it can be quite a tricky disorder to get over. So that's what I have been experiencing and suffering with since I was about 13 or 14. Like sort of officially is when I started receiving therapy for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah. And so ASPD or antisocial personality disorder, for those that don't know, is essentially a cluster B personality disorder. So it's part of a cluster of other personality disorders that are similar. And it's sort of categorized as the emotional and erratic cluster, despite what people may think. So it's usually categorized by a sort of a pervasive pattern of disregard for the rights and feelings of other people. That's like the clinical definition, if you like. But the way in which that manifests in people's lives differs massively. So you've got symptoms like a lack of remorse, a lack of guilt, shallow affect, so like low emotional response, things like that, impulsivity. You do experience, in a lot of cases, trouble with authority or getting in trouble with the police, the law, because you don't really have the same care or understanding in some respects of the way society goes. We don't like that. We don't really care, and we usually have a problem with authority. And BPD is another cluster B personality disorder which has a similar theme, but is categorized by other things like a fear of abandonment, and sort of a more emotionally erratic and explosive reaction to you know, like traumatic events that have caused you to maybe be attached to certain people or attached to certain emotions and certain feelings. It's quite complex, but essentially all cluster B personality disorders have a reoccurring theme that go through them, and it's normally things like a lack of empathy, and I think personally that's like a trauma response. So it's usually birthed from trauma, so it's a way of distancing yourself from other people so you don't get hurt, essentially. But that's it in a nutshell.
Right. That's actually very informative. Thank you so much. So living with ASPD, OCD, and UPD, it's difficult as individuals as well. But when you come together, as couples, adjusting to certain aspects of the disorder with each other might be difficult as well, right? Could you run us through a typical day of where, and share some specific instances where you observe that certain ASPD traits are influencing your daily ASPD and OCD traits are influencing your daily interactions? What does that experience feel like?
Yeah, okay. So when you say a typical day of someone with ASPD, obviously that differs between anyone who suffers with it. It's a sort of spectrum. Some people are more severe, some people are in the middle, some people are a little bit on the lighter side. So I'm obviously a normal human being. So I get up and go to work like everybody else. I'm not an alien. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no sort of marker to be like, oh, he has ASPD. Like it's I tend to keep myself to myself. I tend to stay away from other people just because of the way things have worked in terms of like job, like working from home and that kind of stuff. But I've recently just got a new job where I do have to interact with other people physically, or in office. So the way that looks, if you like, is quite normal. So I'll spend a lot of time, especially in the or like the sort of like the newer stages of me meeting people. I will specifically try my best to come across in a certain way. We call it masking in the mental health community. So you kind of putting on a specific mask to come across in a certain way. Like you want to be perceived in a positive. For me, I want to be perceived in a positive way, so it's easy for me to get through the day and to make friends as well, because a big misconception about people with ASPD is that we're asocial. So asocial and antisocial are two different things. They're not the same. So antisocial is against society. So things that would like thought patterns or actions that go against other people, like violence or I don't know, just a general dislike of people. That's an example. And asocial is what you would typically think of someone who is introverted, doesn't like social contact, things like that. Those two are not the same thing, although they can coexist. They're not the same thing. So I personally enjoy social contact. I like to have friends or acquaintances. I like to have people to bounce off and have human interaction with. So my general day-to-day interactions with other people will revolve around coming across the way they want me to come across. If they like a certain type of music, I now like that type of music. You know, so it's like mirroring. You mirror what they like in order, but it's not to manipulate people into stealing something from them or being violent. It's just to fit in with with society, because with the way my brain works and thought patterns work, I don't always fit in. I'm not average, like my thought patterns, things like that. So if I can mirror someone who is normal or average, then I can then fit in easier, and it makes my life 10 times easier. So that's essentially it. Like it's not like, I'm not chomping at the bit to try and beat people up or steal something. It's just about trying to make sure that I can fit in and protect myself from any sort of harm from other people. Essentially, that's the way it works daily. But Emily, what about you?
For me with OCD at the minute, I think it's quite normal day to day for me, just because I've been in OCD recovery for a few months now. So when I'm suffering bad with the OCD, it looks different day to day. So if I was to be struggling with it, I think it does take up probably most of my life and most of my personality when I'm in my really bad states with it, just because it's so I feel like it just takes up all of my brain, so all of my thoughts will be revolved around the obsessions that I've got that time around, and then a lot of my time will be focused on gaining reassurance seeking, for example, which is a big compulsion of mine. So yeah, when I'm in that bad state, a lot of it is just me being very much about the OCD, so it's all obsessions and all compulsions. At the minute, though, even though I am in OCD recovery, I think I still have to be in sort of a constant state of mindfulness, just so that I understand maybe what a potential trigger could be, and make sure that I don't avoid those triggers and that I allow myself to experience them. Because being in OCD recovery, you can kind of sometimes act like the OCD's gone away completely, when in actual fact it's probably just lying dormant until you get a new obsession. So I think even though my day-to-day life at the minute I've been quite good with my OCD, I've not really had any bad experiences for a while. I'm still in that constant state of mindfulness, making sure that I'm not engaging in any compulsions and allowing that to slowly come back in. But yeah, overall, I think it does take up quite a big chunk of my personality and quite a big chunk of my life. But I think that is the same for anyone that's suffering with any mental health disorder, because it affects everything: job, the way that you think, the way that you feel, probably the way that you act with people as well. It is the same for me with my OCD as well.
Could you give us
Yeah.
an example of how it's manifested, like some of the thoughts or some of the compulsions and obsessions that you have?
A big theme that I recently had to overcome was regarding relationship OCD. So one of my big issues, because I do have a fear of abandonment that's always present throughout a lot of my OCD themes. So a big one when it was related to relationship OCD was a constant fear that Jake was going to leave me or find someone better, or that Jake might be cheating on me. And in a relationship, it's quite a difficult thing because it would manifest in me feeling like I'm constantly monitoring his behaviour, checking the way that he's acting towards me, checking the way that he's feeling about me, which then puts a big strain on myself personally. So it makes me feel quite low physically and mentally as well. So when the relationship OCD is bad, I think that manifests outwards into myself because I lose the confidence that I have. I don't feel good about the way that I look. And then it also manifests in a way that I feel guilty towards the way that I've perhaps acted with Jake, or maybe that I'm not being good enough for him because I've got this constant fear of abandonment, even though he is a really great partner and he's never given me a reason to worry about anything like that. But I think it's hard to separate because it's OCD, it's not something that I've chosen, and it's not necessarily come from any past experiences, it's just there for me. So I think it's trying to understand that it's not because I don't trust Jake or because our relationship isn't good, it's just because it attacks the things that I care about the most. So obviously the relationship at the minute is the thing that I care about the most. And yeah, even with other OCD themes, so like harm OCD, it will always come back to that. But what if my family don't love me anymore because I'm having these thoughts? Or what if I have hurt someone and Jake doesn't want to be with me anymore? It always comes back to that. So I think a big manifestation for me and my OCD is a fear of abandonment as well.
How do you overcome it?
It is really tricky for the OCD, like to overcome it. I couldn't do it without therapy. I've been lucky enough to be able to afford to go to private therapy because the times that I've needed it, I've been at a breaking point. So I wasn't able to wait for the NHS to offer free therapy for me. So I've been I've been lucky enough to access private therapy, and that is the way that I've had to overcome it. Just because you have to expose yourself to the OCD to overcome it. You have to completely stop all compulsions because you get in a really bad cycle with it. And you have to sort of accept the thoughts that you're feeling and not be afraid of them, but because they feel so real time, because they attack everything that I care about the most, it's really difficult to do on my own. So for me, I've had to go to therapy for that, and I've worked hard with my therapist to accept the thoughts that I'm feeling, to completely stop engaging in compulsions, which it's really addictive. It's hard to do as well. So I think to overcome it, it's quite tough and it takes a lot of willpower. But for me, I think working with someone else really helped, and I have to make people around me aware as well. So Jake has to be aware that he can't offer me any reassurance when it comes to my OCD because that can put me back in the cycle. same with my family and same with my friends. So I think a big thing is being open and honest with the people around me and saying, this is what I'm suffering with at the minute. You know, please don't offer me reassurance. Even if you're struggling to do that, maybe just say that you don't want to talk about it with me and just have to be quite harsh with me. As horrible as that might sound, it's the best thing for me, and it's the only way that I can overcome that.
What's the best piece of advice you got in therapy? Or not well advice, but what's the best step or suggestion that you got in therapy regarding overcoming your obsessions?
I think it was sort of like a work in progress. So
Mhm.
for me, it was like little and often. So when you're cutting out the compulsions, you can either just completely cut them out all straight away, or you can decide to do one at a time and then see how you feel with them. And obviously everyone's different, so you work with your therapist to see what you prefer. But I think the best piece of advice that I've been given by my therapist was probably that the thoughts that I'm experiencing, they can't physically harm you. It's mentally quite disturbing, but it won't ever physically harm you. And I think it's just that allowing those thoughts to come in, because they are intrusive, and I think when you try and stop them, they become stronger. So just completely letting go of control actually gives you control back of your life, which I always found really weird, because with OCD, I seek control. I want to try and control everything around me. But my therapist actually said, if you let go of everything and all the control that you've got surrounding these compulsions, you'll slowly see that control coming back naturally. I think that was probably the biggest piece of advice that I got from a therapist, was to just let go, and sort of trust the process. Is as scary as that sounds.
That does sound scary, but I've heard that too. Like in the mental health healing, you need to trust the process. It gets chaotic, it gets ugly, but there is no other choice but to trust the process. And yeah, if you have the right therapist for you, then it's like a battle half won, something like that.
Yeah,
But yeah.
definitely. Yeah, that is very true.
Yeah. So did you guys know before getting together that you had your respective diagnosis?
No. So I think Emily, because of the project that we were working on under antisocial theatre, Emily was loosely aware that it was me that we were talking about with the project. Or that's kind of the basis of of its inception, was my diagnosis, or my history with it. But I don't think Emily understood what it was. Didn't truly understand what it was, which actually caused probably the biggest issues we've had in our relationship, was the misunderstanding of how the symptoms manifest. So obviously with ASPD, I'm quite emotionless in certain respects. Like when it comes to like negative emotion, like crying or I don't know, anything like that, I don't really have a response to. It doesn't really register. So I'm able to understand why. So I'm able to be there, but I'm not able to physically get it. I don't understand it as much as maybe the average person might do. So it makes it hard to connect in that respect, I think, or it has made it hard to connect in that respect. But yeah, I didn't really know about OCD, Emily having OCD, until we got together, or like until we argued, until we clashed, and then I found, once we spoke, I found out what it was, and I was educated myself a little bit more about it, and I was like, all right, okay, I understand, I get it a bit more now. But yeah, that's just going back a little bit as well, if I may. When you mentioned about how a typical day might look for us two, when something does happen, when like an argument or an issue does arise, the typical issue that you would look at for us would be if Emily was in an emotional state. For example, the example she gave about feeling like I'm doing something wrong or something's happening. If she's quite heightened in emotion, I tend to get sometimes irritated by that. If there's like a certain level of emotion coming my way, I don't like it. Like, it annoys me. It angers me. So probably because I don't really understand it. So it's like a foreign language. I don't really understand what's being said to me. So it gets me annoyed. So I'll tend to distance myself from it for a little while. Like we have like a sort of a set thing, don't we? Where we'll distance we'll like spend a bit of time away from each other to like settle into it, and then we can come together and talk about it. But that's like a typical example of how it would clash,
Right.
which I think was probably important to mention earlier. But yeah, that answers it, I think.
How do you have these conversations regarding the diagnosis? Like, for someone who might be in similar shoes, that they might have certain diagnosis and they are together as a couple, what would you say is the best way to have these difficult conversations?
My best advice is quite simply to let go of your ego, and understand that other people, if you are interested in making the relationship work, you need to like let go of your ego and understand that the world doesn't just revolve around you and how you feel. As much as it's hard to do that sometimes, you have to take yourself out of yourself and realize that there's another person involved who doesn't see the world in the way you do, who doesn't see responses in the way that you do. Not everybody sees through the same lens. So when you understand that not everyone is wearing the same view of the world as you, then you can sit down and have these conversations and actually listen to the other person as well. Like, don't speak when the other person's talking. Don't speak. Just listen. Do nothing. You don't have to do anything. It's easy. You just listen, and then have a moment and formulate a response. That's the best advice: is actually actively listen to what the other person is saying. Don't just be there. Listen to what they're saying, and vice versa. That's probably my best advice.
Yeah, I think for me it would just be to be honest, because I think in the past, for me especially, I do this thing with my OCD where if I want help from it, I sometimes talk about the OCD, but maybe change the theme that I've got because it's easier for me to talk about. So I almost get the help that I need without actually saying the specific issue. But the only thing is it always will come back. So whatever you've tried to push away will come back anyway. So if you can just be as honest and open with that person as soon as you can, and maybe just be completely honest, because I think if it's something like your mental health, it's a reoccurring theme anyway, so it will come back. And I think it's an important conversation to have, especially if it's someone that you care about and you want a long-term relationship with. You are going to have to learn to be honest about it. And I'm not saying you'd have to go in there straight away and tell them everything, but slowly allow yourself to be open, because to get the best out of a relationship, the other person needs to know who you are and what you're dealing with as well, because you want to be there for them and they will obviously want to be there for you as well. So I think honesty is also a really big thing.
In navigating your relationship with each other, and also dealing with your own struggles, do you ever feel that you're not what society perceives to be, let's say, quote unquote, a normal couple? And like, what are the challenges that you face, which may not others like face?
I don't know. I always see a lot of stuff on like TikTok and Instagram about how couples should be, and I just think it's so unrealistic anyway. I think there's kind of like no such thing as like a normal couple. I think everyone's different and everyone's got their own boundaries. And sometimes I see things that people post and I just think I wouldn't necessarily think like that. But it's not that what they're thinking is wrong. I think it's just different things work for different people, and like what we have works for us. I think I've mentioned it before, but for me with like my OCD, like having someone like Jake actually benefits it, because I can go to him and I can talk to him about everything. And I've spoke to friends about it in the past and they've sort of been like almost like disgusted about the way that I've thought, and that's quite hurtful. Whereas Jake never thinks like that, because I think we've both suffered with the intrusive thoughts anyway, so we've both kind of experienced a similar thing. So yeah, I think it just works for us. But in terms of like a normal couple, we probably aren't a normal couple, but I think it works for us. And a lot of the things that I've seen, I think everyone's just got their own boundaries, and what works for you works for you.
I think maybe it might be, I in my opinion, I'm probably maybe slightly better than a lot of the people that I see, especially online, because some people in the public sphere seem to be completely unaware of how they're acting and how their partner acts, like completely oblivious. Either that or they just don't care. Whereas because I've struggled since being a child on how to relate to other people, I've literally had to work from the ground up and learn from other people how to act with other people, to work out when people are upset, learn the appropriate response. I still to this day study people's behavior. I read a lot of books about the subject, psychology, things like that. So I'm very clued up on how people respond and how people react. Like I'm always in social situations, especially, I'm always looking at people's body language and how people are reacting to other people, and pick up on little micro expressions that maybe other people are ignoring. And I'm able to use that sort of in conversation, or use that to my societal advantage. So the same thing happens in the relationship, because I'm so aware and in tune with how Emily responds or reacts to certain situations. I can click onto it straight away and deal with it. Do you know what I mean? So I would even go as far as to say we're probably maybe more in tune as a couple than modern couples, because we understand each other more because we've had to. That's the way we work mentally. We have to understand each other to a T, or else it doesn't work. And obviously, as a result, I have to understand everybody else that I come into contact with. I like to scrutinize people, basically. I like to look at every little detail and work out why people do things, and work out patterns when I'm hanging around certain people. And I've done that with Emily, obviously. So it's quite methodical, if you like, but it works, and it has worked. So yeah, I think it's probably better than the average relationship, if I'm honest.
I love that. I love that so much. So, Jake, I know Emily seeks therapy for her condition. Do you also go to therapy?
I do, yeah. Recently, in the past, I don't know, 6 months, maybe, probably longer than that, actually. I've been trying to get into therapy again. Like for the last year, I tried quite hard to get back into therapy, because I kind of relapsed with the like bad thoughts and urges and things like that came back for me. So I kind of relapsed a little bit with that. So I went to seek therapy. Long story short, I eventually got to see somebody or talk to somebody regularly over the phone. I usually have those once every 2 weeks. It's been very helpful for me. So I've learned a lot of things about my negative thought patterns, and how things that I perceive to be normal behavior is actually maybe not so normal, or my thought patterns are not so normal, rather. So how I view other people, how I view myself isn't normal. So I'm always thinking about things from sort of a negative tint, or negative view, or like hyper vigilant. I'm on the kind of on the lookout for something to be wary of. So, and my therapist said to me, you've not been able to exercise compassion for other people because you've never been shown how to yourself when you were a child, which is very true. Like, it obviously all stems back to when I was a child, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But it's been very helpful for me to sort of unravel my own thought patterns from the outside point of view, rather than always looking inside. Someone on the external is viewing it from their point of view. And it's very refreshing. It's very nice. It's very helpful. But I just want to say as well to anyone who's listening, if you do suffer with cluster B personality disorders in general, you're not exempt from therapy. You're allowed to have it. You deserve to have it if you want it. And it is very helpful. So highly recommend.
Absolutely, yeah. Did you learn, like, living with each other? I'm assuming you live together. Sorry, about like being abrupt. So, living together now and being together for about 4 years now. Are there any lessons that you learned from your partner's mental health condition that positively impacted your own well-being?
I think for me, one thing that I've learned that is positive, and I think that's helped me develop as a person, probably just from the way that Jake reacts to things, and it's helped with my fear of abandonment. Just because someone maybe is withdrawn one day, or because somebody doesn't perhaps want to like talk specifically about an issue to you, it doesn't mean that you've necessarily done anything wrong. It's just that that person needs a bit of space and a bit of time. And I think with Jake, one thing that you need when you're in, you know, maybe a bad mindset is sometimes you just need to be on your own. And I think at first I really struggled with that because it would trigger my abandonment. I'd be thinking, well, he doesn't want to be with me anymore. Why don't you want to talk to me? But from living together and experiencing that a bit more regularly than when we were just first seeing each other, it's allowed me to sort of maybe let each other grow individually as well as together, and understand that it's not a bad thing to be two separate people. I think at first, when we first started seeing each other, because my fear of abandonment was so strong, I used to want to maybe like merge to Jake and become one person. In actual fact, it's not healthy to do that. So I think learning to be independent but living together has been really beneficial for me. And I think that comes from me understanding your disorder more. And yeah, I think that's for me a positive impact.
I think for me, it's like I've learned maybe some valuable skills that are transferable in real life. So, for example, I've spoken about this before, but it's compassion, for example, is a choice. So, you know, there's plenty of people who do feel empathy that don't act compassionately and are actually quite nasty. So compassion is something you choose to be. You can choose to act compassionately. And that's something that I've learned from Emily, living with Emily and experiencing her mental health conditions and things like that, is like you can act compassionately to somebody even if it doesn't directly benefit you, or like even if you don't feel it, even if it doesn't register in your mind, like you're not, you know, for want of a better term, you don't really care, it doesn't react to you emotionally. That doesn't mean you can't act compassionately. Like you can still care about somebody, and you know, we all do things that we don't want to do, kind of thing, but you do them because you love the person, that kind of thing. So it's kind of taught me to be able to act compassionately, or to highlight moments where I should be acting compassionately rather than walking away, that kind of thing. So it's just like learning sort of valuable interpersonal skills that you can carry on to external relationships like jobs and social situations, that kind of thing. So it's just probably like that for me, just normal human skills, really.
Right, that makes sense. So as we are coming towards an end of the episode, what is one piece of advice that you would give to our listeners?
One piece of advice that I would give is probably when it comes to mental health specifically, stop comparing yourself to other people. Stop listening to what everyone says on social media. Like it's a pretty tumultuous place on social media. So if you're seeking help for something like a personality disorder, for example, my honest advice is take it with a pinch of salt what you read online, because it doesn't often reflect the reality of how people actually live. And it doesn't mean, like, you know, you're not a monster, you're not evil just for having these thoughts and feelings. It's quite normal, despite what you're told. So that would be my advice.
I think for me, I think I've mentioned this before, but like one piece of advice I'd give, maybe specific to OCD, is that don't be afraid to reach out for help. Obviously, OCD creates some very scary thoughts, intrusive thoughts, often quite harmful at times, and it can make you feel like it's manifested in your whole personality. But don't be afraid to reach out for help, because, you know, mental health professionals do understand OCD, and you won't be seen as a monster by a mental health professional. And there is treatment out there for you, and it can be a tough journey, but you can definitely live a normal life with OCD, and learn to get through that. Even if there is no cure, you can still do everything that you've always wanted to do in life. It just takes a bit of time, but I think, you know, putting that time into yourself is probably like the biggest investment you can ever make.
Life's too short, go and enjoy it, basically.
Yeah, love that. Is there anything that I might have missed out on that you would like to talk about?
Not really. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, to be fair.
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered.
I was just going to say, one of the next posts that we're putting on Frantic Social Theatre is actually going to be talking about something that is often neglected when we're talking about personality disorders, and that's what you can achieve when you've got personality disorders. Everyone likes to focus on the negatives, what you can't do, how you know, what things that you've struggled with. So I want to highlight some of the things that I've achieved despite having these things. So that's going to be the next post. So keep your eyes out for that.
Yeah.
Keep your eyes out. I'll be linking all the social media. Where can people find you?
So you can find us on Antisocial Theatre over on Instagram. We've migrated now to TikTok and YouTube, but predominantly Instagram.
Yeah.
I'll be linking down all the socials down in the description in the show notes of the episode. So do check it out. And thank you so much for sticking through the end. I hope you got a lot of insight into their journey. It is not an easy thing living with OCD or ASPD in itself. And coming together, I'm sure that there must be challenges of its own that come together with it. And yeah, you being open about it means a lot. It creates such a powerful impact onto other people who may not be able to talk about their journey per se, but it helps someone feel less alone. So thank you so much for the work that you do. And for all the listeners out there, thank you so much for sticking through. You're the reason why we are able to do what we do. If you're listening to this on YouTube, you know the drills. Subscribe if you haven't already and hit the like button, and do let us know in the comments what resonated with you the most. If you have any questions for Jake, please do reach out to him as well. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, give this a 5-star review. It helps us reach out to other fellow listeners who might get benefited from it. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. I love you. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.